Hello Booktubers, Leah Cooper here. It's Tuesday, which means I'm doing another tag Tuesday. This week I'm doing the LGBTQIA plus Booktuber tag. I was not tagged to do this video, but I saw Cece over on Problems of a Book do it. I liked the questions, I identify as a queer booktuber, and I figured I'd do it. So I will leave a link to the original video down below as well as the questions, and I'm gonna make two adjustments to how I do this tag. So first of all, I use the term queer. I use it as a nice umbrella term that is non-offensive, that is inclusive, that doesn't unnecessarily put people into boxes or exclude people because they don't happen to fall under, one of the acronyms. And I know that there are some people who don't like that term, and I know that there is some disagreement over whether or not we should be using that term or whether or not we have, as a community, not trying to do the royal we, but we as the queer community have taken that word back because it has in the past been used as a slur. Personally, because of my history with learning about myself and other people and other identities and gender and all that sort of stuff, the professor who opened my eyes to this stuff and to myself in many ways used the term queer. There was something really profoundly inclusive and powerful about David introducing the word queer into my vocabulary, and it is a part of my vocabulary. So I will probably use that instead of LGBTQIA plus because it's quicker. It's what I use, for all those reasons I talked about. I don't mean to offend anyone, like really genuinely not. And so I hope that's cool. The other thing is, I don't like the order that these questions were listed in. I don't think it makes a good narrative flow for like a discussion of this topic, because this is like the second time I've had to film this video because the first time it was all over the place. I'm going to answer them out of order. So question number one, and this is question number one, is how do you identify? I identify as demisexual, technically, specifically, and demi-romantic. Now, I will leave a link to an article, I don't know from where, but I'll look around, I'll find something that is good and succinct. If you've never heard that term, and if you want to know more, in a nutshell, I don't identify as either straight or gay, and the way my partner identifies isn't really material to me either. For me, romantic and sexual attraction is 100% about the person and on an individual case-by-case basis and the relationship I develop with that individual person. And I never feel romantic or sexual desire or interest in someone until I have known them for a very long time and have a very good relationship with them. When I'm talking to people, straight people, usually people who really aren't educated in this stuff at all, usually I just say that I'm queer, or if they're really confused, I'll just say that I'm bisexual, but that's not really accurate or correct. So yeah, you do what you have to do, just that you don't have to go into a half-hour long educational monologue because someone asks you your orientation. You know what I'm saying? The next question I want to answer is actually question number 3. And that is, how often do you talk about queer books on your channel, and what are some of the vids that you would rec people to check out if they are looking for that kind of content? Specifically, I don't do topical discussion videos very often. I do fairly regularly read books with queer characters. And so I'm very open about that. Like, I read a lot of queer romance novels or queer genre fiction novels because those are what I enjoy. And so it's pretty much scattered through my wrap-ups. The only individual book review that have queer characters in it that I've done would be my Captive Prince trilogy review. I will link that up above if you're at all interested. Then the next question I want to answer is actually question number 4, and that is, who are some of your fave queer booktubers? A couple of my favorite queer booktubers would have to be Jen Campbell, who, I'm sure everyone has heard of Jen. She's an amazing booktuber. She identifies as bisexual, I believe. She's also a book writer, and she's been a bookseller, and she does amazing videos on fairy tales, which is something I love and I'm very interested in, and I adore watching her videos. She also makes fairly regular recommendation lists for queer literary fiction. Another more literary fiction booktuber who I believe identifies as gay, who I really love watching, is Simon from Savage Reads. He is always just really funny and warm, and watching his videos, like whether it's a vlog where he's, you know, running all over England, saying all this crazy cool stuff, and doing events, or if it's him interviewing an author, or just having a cuppa and a ketchup, he just brings a smile to my face, because he seems like such a sweet, cuddly, hilarious person, and he likes to take the mick out of himself a little bit. And also he recs and reads not only literary fiction but also kind of literary thriller fiction, which is something I am interested in, so I get a lot of really cool book recs. And then for someone who reads more fantasy genre fiction, another booktuber I love to watch is Winx from Winx and Ink. She reads a lot of high fantasy, and so some of it's not necessarily what I'd be super into, but she also reads sword and sorcery. Like, it's not all Robin Hobb on her channel. Like, she reads other types of fantasy, lots of dragons, and just cool stuff. The last person I can think of to name in this video would be Adriana over at Perpetual Pages. Now, I only recently started watching her videos, and so I don't have a good feel for like what all books she reads. However, she makes great discussion videos about diversity and queerness and, you know, representation in books and the community, and they're always so thoughtful and well put together. I wish I could do discussion videos like she does, but it's just not in my wheelhouse. I will leave a link to all of these people down below if you are interested in checking any of them out. I highly recommend it. I guess it was just question 2 that I didn't want to answer in the order that it is listed, but on to question number 5, which is, when was the first time you encountered a queer character in fiction? I have been thinking about this and trying to think of a character in a book, and I honestly don't have a good answer for that, because it might have been The Magpie Lord by KJ Charles, which I read when I was 23, almost 24, I think. Like, never encountered a queer character in a book prior to that, which feeds into why I spent a really long time not reading published books. So let's backtrack and talk about the first time I ever saw a queer character in a film, because that stands out really vividly in my mind. I can't exactly remember how old I was, probably 10 or so, and the talented Mr. Ripley played on the television, but I remember coming into it, you know, about a quarter of the way in and watching it first with my dad, who then went to bed, and then I finished watching it. Now, obviously, that movie is based off of a book, but I have not read the book. And for those of you who don't know, it stars a young Matt Damon. It's got Jude Law, Cate Blanchett, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and it is a historical piece. I want to say it takes place in like the 50s. Jude Law plays a rich young man who's, I think, frittering away money in Europe, and his father sends Matt Damon's character, who is rather poor and down on his luck, to Europe to bring him home. And in the course of Matt Damon's character becoming obsessed with and essentially falling in love with Jude Law's character, he can't get him to come home. He's watching him kind of fritter money and party, fuck his girlfriend. It all takes place on a boat, and there's an attraction between them. There's this love/obsession that Matt Damon's character feels for Jude Law's character. Jude Law is fairly dismissive and contemptuous of Damon's character. Matt Damon's character, like, I don't want to spoil it, but he does something terrible that, because it plays with this line between love and obsession, and then he, like, everything just, like, he gets himself into this plot, and he just keeps digging himself into this hole that gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and then he does eventually fall in love with someone else who loves him back, but then all of this horrible web of lies that will totally send him to prison is like looming over his character, and the guy that he's in love with potentially might figure out this whole mess he is in. And so again, he digs himself even deeper, and it is not a happy story at all. But I remember watching it and being so enthralled and blown away, that because I had never seen, in this case, a gay character before, ever, in anything. Because I come from a very like conservative religious background. And I just remember the next day trying to talk to my dad about it, because I loved it. I loved the movie, and I was just like so wrapped up in the tragic love story of it all. And I remember trying to talk to him about it in this like just mixed up, scrambled, like halting way, and it's stuck out in my head. I'm sure it made him extremely uncomfortable, because my parents are homophobic, is a word cemented in my head. Is the first time I ever encountered a character like that in anything. I would say a couple years later, I was swept up into fandom and fan fiction, not queer fan fiction at first. It was straight fan fiction. It wasn't until my second fandom that I was actually introduced to slash as a thing, and that radically changed my life and my reading habits, because it was all of this really great queer, all these really great queer stories being told for free that I couldn't find anywhere else. And so for a large portion of, I would say, junior high, high school, and my early adulthood, I didn't read books. I didn't read published books, or very, very few of them, because I just didn't see what the point was. It was all straight and stuff that just didn't interest me. It was kind of like, why would I pay for this stuff that's just, I don't identify with it. It doesn't reflect me. It doesn't reflect the reality I live in. I just have no interest in it. And so I that's why I kind of think that possibly picking up The Magpie Lord by K.J. Charles, which is an historical paranormal fantasy romance novel, was possibly the first time I ever read a book with a queer character. It's possible there's a side character in something I read that I am spacing on. I don't think so. That's the story. So, wrapping back around to question number 2 is, what are some of your fave queer books and authors? There are probably queer authors who are queer that I just don't realize it, who I really like. I want to say Yoon Lee, though that is wrapped up in Own Voices stuff, which Yoon Lee recently wrote a great post on stop demanding authors out themselves to prove that a work is own voices, which I will link down below. And the other thing is, like, a lot of the queer authors I know of aren't necessarily, and who I respect, aren't necessarily mainstream people that you would have heard of, but, you know, a couple of friends who are indie authors and fall somewhere on the spectrum would be Gavin, who writes under the pen name Jaylee James, and Elliot Cooper, and I think Lena Langley IDs somewhere on the spectrum. I will leave a link down to their Twitters. They're all really cool people. They write, like I said, indie books, lots of kind of romance, genre fiction, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, question number 6 is, do you have anything to add? Okay. I do, actually. I had to think about that. But, you know, I kind of do. Kind of my send-off thing is, there are queer people writing books. There are queer people writing queer books. There are queer people writing really awesome, fun, great queer books. If you profess to be someone who supports the queer community and diversity in books, stop reading books by professed homophobic authors. Because there's no better way to look like a hypocrite than to talk about in one breath how you wish there was better queer representation in books, than to hold up, yeah, I just read all these books by a homophobic author. Like, it's just, and I see it happen on Booktube again and again and again and again. Especially if you're like a supposed straight ally. Just like, don't do it. I don't care how good the books are by a homophobe. Like, there are some very talented homophobic authors. There's an obvious one who's very popular on Booktube, and I've harped on people reading him before, so I will use a different example. Orson Scott Card is a brilliant author. He can really write. Ender's Game, I thought, was a very good book when I read it. It was a few years ago, but like craft-wise, it was a great book. He also wrote another book I read called Enchantment, I think, which I thought was genius. But he's an asshole. Like, he is a major homophobic asshole. On top of other things. Like, he's also terrible to people who write fanfic or in fandom. And so it doesn't matter how good of an author he is. When I read some of the things that he had said, when I realized the sort of person he was, I ripped up my copies of his books and I threw them away. Because you don't need to be supporting those people. You don't need to be giving them their time. And I don't care if you get their books for free. If you talk about their books on a platform like this, or a blog, or Twitter, that is advertising for them. And so you're making the conscious decision to advertise for people who are assholes to a minority group. And there's no excuse for that. I mean, there's totally an excuse for ignorance if you don't know. But if you learn about people who are terrible and you choose to continue to support them and to further their careers instead seeking out non-asshole people who are also writing cool stuff, which is out there, it just might not be published by a big 5 publisher, or it just might not have the marketing campaign behind it. If you choose to do that, though, if you choose to support assholes, you're not an ally, and you just look like a hypocrite when you talk about wanting more queer diversity in books. So that's my soapbox. I will step off of it now, and I don't know who to tag, but if you're watching this and you consider yourself a queer booktuber, consider yourself tagged. Let me know down in the comments below so I can check out your channel. And I hope this has been informational. I don't know. It mostly was just rambling. So yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.